So I'm thinking how it is fascinating how life can be improved by techniques or devices that are created. But it occurs to me that the way our lives improves is by getting the initial idea for making a change. And then we proceed to find a technique or a device or whatever to make the change happen. And I'm thinking it is really incredible how we solve certain problems in life. But what has to happen first is the initial idea, initial concept for a change needs to be formed, and then the change can happen. So I'm thinking, for example, about the camera. How did some guy realize it would be possible to capture an image permanently? And then, of course, you get the guy who realizes that you could record in video. So I don't know how the concept of the video ever came into some guy's head. And the same with the concept of the camera, the initial concept of taking a photograph. How did that idea come into some guy's head? How did the concept, the very possibility of it, how was that formed in some guy's head? And the same I'm thinking of with the telephone or the radio. How could you possibly get the idea it would be possible to communicate with somebody you couldn't see or hear directly? How do you get this concept? How is it possible to imagine something like a radio or a telephone could be invented? I don't understand how the concept for a telephone could come into some guy's head. It doesn't make sense how some guy would think it would be possible to communicate with somebody who was miles away. How did the possibility that that could be done, how was that idea formed in someone's head? It doesn't seem logical that anyone would think it would be possible to communicate with somebody you can see or hear or that was miles away. I don't understand how the concept of the telephone could ever have come into anyone's head. And then once the concept comes into the head, then you can start thinking of techniques to achieve it. But the thing that is most surprising and most difficult to understand is how did the very idea would be possible to use a telephone to communicate with someone miles away. That is the most impressive thing and the most absolutely amazing thing. And I'm wondering how some guy dreamt up the telephone and people around him must have thought he was crazy to think he could communicate with somebody that he couldn't see and that was who was miles away. I think it is truly amazing how anyone could realize it would be possible to communicate with somebody who was miles away. You can see or hear directly. How did some guy realize it would be possible to invent a telephone? I really don't understand how the concept of the telephone could come into anyone's head. I need to look into how it would be possible to invent a telephone. because the first step in inventing the telephone is to get the very idea it would be possible to communicate with somebody who was miles away, who you couldn't see or hear directly. I don't understand how the concept for that came into some guy's head. How did the idea would be possible into anyone's head? And people around him must have thought he was crazy for imagining he could communicate with somebody he couldn't see or hear directly. I don't understand how the concept for a telephone could have come into being. I don't understand how it's possible to ever imagine it would be possible to use a telephone. And then, of course, you've got the actual creation of the telephone, which is a separate thing. It's the idea for a telephone itself, which I find the most impressive and inexplicable.